If you're watching this on the Legacy of Survival channel, let me say this up front. Make sure you subscribe right now, because what we're about to discuss isn't the usual pop history recap. This is the kind of material serious historians and survival-minded viewers come here for, lessons pulled from the mud, cold and chaos of trenches that shape the modern world. For the next minute, consider this a direct conversation between people who respect the past and want to pull something useful from it. Trenches weren't romantic, and they weren't primitive. They were pressure cookers of innovation, where small tricks meant the difference between functioning and failing, between life and death. Today, almost no one covers the subtle techniques soldiers developed to endure the elements, maintain readiness, and outthink an enemy who was often just a few dozen yards away. Yet those tricks still hold real practical value for anyone studying survival, fieldcraft, or the historical realities of frontline life. Now let's get into the lessons themselves, unfiltered, grounded, and fully applicable. Why trench placement was a survival skill, not just fortification design. WWII troops didn't simply dig wherever the ground felt convenient. A well-placed trench used natural elevation, drainage paths, and soil composition to prevent collapse and flooding. The practical takeaway is straightforward. Whenever you dig a defensive or shelter trench today, you evaluate the slope first, then the soil. Clay-heavy ground drains poorly but holds shape. Sandy soil drains well but collapses easily. Soldiers in WWII often reinforce sandy walls with woven branches or even spare rifle crates. If you're setting up a temporary survival position in open terrain, you can apply the same principle by using fallen branches, gear panels, or packed-in vegetation as ribbing to prevent sloughing. How micro-drainage channels controlled water before it became a threat. Flooded trenches weren't just uncomfortable, they destroyed equipment, ruined ammunition, and bred disease. Troops carved narrow V-shaped microchannels along trench floors to redirect groundwater into sump pits. These pits were then bailed out with mess tins or repurposed fuel cans. Modern application is simple but powerful. Whenever you build a dugout shelter, create a controlled path for water before a storm hits. A shallow runoff channel leading away from your sleeping area buys you time and preserves your gear. You don't need tools. Boots, flat stones, or even the side of a canteen cup can scrape a workable channel. Why soldiers used layered insulation techniques to stay warm and dry. WWII trench fighters learned fast that warmth wasn't about owning a thick coat, it was about managing moisture. They layered wool under outer windbreakers, and more importantly, they rotated socks methodically. Dry socks were kept under clothing to stay warm from body heat. Wet socks went near the armpits to dry using radiant heat. For modern fieldcraft, this trick remains gold. Whenever you're outdoors for extended periods, treat socks and underlayers as a rotating system. Even in summer, preserving foot dryness prevents blisters and maintains mobility. It's one of the cheapest, most effective survival techniques you can use. Now, you might wonder why rations were stored high inside trenches rather than in dugouts. Well, food spoiled quickly underground due to humidity and stagnant air, you see. To prevent this, troops used elevated shelves carved into the trench walls, often reinforced with scrap wood or metal. Keeping rations off the floor also discouraged rodents, which were, a constant nuisance. In present-day survival shelter building, the principle is identical. Keep food high, dry and ventilated. Even in a makeshift lean-to, it's best to suspend rations from a crossbar or lash them between forked branches to reduce moisture exposure and animal interference. Silence in trenches wasn't optional, it was absolutely vital. Soldiers improvised noise discipline using natural materials. They packed loose soil, cloth or vegetation into hollow spots that echoed deadening sound. Sandbags were placed on edges where equipment tended to clatter. If you're moving through forest or brush today, you can adapt the same methods by padding the loud parts of your pack, tying off loose buckles, and using soft natural materials like moss or bark as temporary dampeners. This level of fieldcraft rarely gets discussed, but it directly influenced nighttime patrol success in the Second World War, believe it or not. Trench fighters created personal dry zones to protect their most critical gear. Each soldier maintained a small waterproof cache, often nothing more than a wax pouch or oiled cloth, where they stored matches, letters, maps, notebooks and backup ammunition. This simple habit saved countless lives when trenches flooded or equipment was dropped honestly. The modern lesson is foundational: seal your essentials in a secondary layer. A simple freezer bag or waxed cloth wrap performs the same role today, no matter where you are. Let's talk about how soldiers managed to use controlled fires without giving away their position. Open flames were, well, quite rare in the forward trenches, but small ember-based heating pits were actually pretty common. A shallow hole lined with stones would allow for low-smoke warmth, which was handy for drying clothes or heating water. You can replicate this by building what's called a Dakota-style fire hole. It really contains the heat and limits any visible flame. It's efficient, discreet, and, honestly, excellent for wet environments. Now let's look at how soldiers kept morale and alertness high through micro-routines. Trench life punished the mind just as much as the body, you know. Veterans maintained short, repetitive routines, things like weapon checks, sock rotations, drainage inspections, and meal prep cycles, not just out of discipline, but because routine anchored their mental state. If you ever find yourself in a long-term survival situation, it's wise to adopt a structured cycle. Break the day into tasks you repeat, whether you feel like it or not. This really preserves mental resilience and, well, reduces mistakes. There's a good reason every trench had a secondary exit, and it's something we can learn for survival shelters today. A single entrance is just a single point of failure. Collapses, artillery, or an enemy breach could trap soldiers instantly. That's why many trenches included narrow escape cuts leading to reserve positions. For modern application, never rely on just one exit in a dugout or long-term shelter. Even a small crawl-sized escape tunnel or cutaway section provides literal life-saving redundancy. If this kind of deep-cut history and practical survival crossover is your thing, make sure you subscribe to the Legacy of Survival channel and share this guide with someone who appreciates real, hard-earned knowledge from the past.